Okay, so this video is going to be about using ASIO Link Pro to send networked audio over the internet to any other PC with ASIO Link Pro. And I'll also go over some of the various routing capabilities and show you really how powerful this piece of software is. So first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Give Academy page that's linked in the description and download the installer and download this combined patcher. And once you have that, you're going to go ahead and install ASIO Link Pro, and it's going to ask you if you want to install 16 stereo devices. Say yes to that, and that should be pretty much it on the install side of things. And after you install it, you can open up the patcher, allow it to run, take the 32-bit version, apply the patch, take the 64-bit version, apply the patch. If you have any issues with that step, you might want to open and close ASIO Link Pro before trying to patch it. Make sure that it's not running in the background while you do patch it. So at this point, you should have ASIO Link Pro installed. And when you go to open it up, actually I should go back. You search for it, you'll find that there's two. You have ASIO Link Pro Tool, that's the 64-bit version, and the 32-bit version. So run whichever version your system is built on. Mine is 64. So here is the 64-bit version. They look exactly the same. And first you won't see this panel. You'll only see this small panel here. And there's a couple settings that you should turn on. You want to enable the looper racks and enable the second network in-out rack. You don't necessarily need to do these things, but I found them both to be useful. You can always turn them off in the future. And once you've done that, start ASIO. And you'll get a little window that comes up that looks something like this when you first start it. This is where you select your interface or your driver that you want to use. So if you don't have anything here, then you want to install ASIO for all and use that as your driver. But in my case, I have the Universal Audio Thunderbolt. I'm going to select that. Okay, so pick your driver, Universal Audio Thunderbolt, and click OK. And I already have this routing loaded up here, but I'm going to quickly go over, because this is the most intimidating part about this program, is it's not very descriptive on what each of these racks actually do. So I'll quickly go over this before I get into the networking side of things, because this is really important to get the most functionality out of this. First, this top rack here, this ASIO VAD Pro speakers in rack. These are your 16 stereo ins and outs that were installed with the driver. So that's the speakers in up top here, this green one, and the brown one down here, the mix out. So these would be your driver outputs and these would be your driver inputs. So for instance, if you are playing Spotify and you wanted to assign Spotify an output in Windows, I actually have this done. So I will open Spotify and I'll play something. And you can see up here, this is Spotify coming out. It's coming out of left and right of mix 2, or speakers 2, sorry. So there's speakers 1, speakers 2, speakers 3, all the way to speakers 16, left and right of those. So I went to do this to the Windows sound settings and advanced sound options, Spotify. This is where I set the output. So now I've got Spotify coming in through Link Pro on speakers 1 and 2. And then in Discord, for instance, if you wanted to pipe things into Discord or Skype or whatever you would put a microphone into, that's what these mix out channels are for. So you've got 16 stereo mix outs. So you can see right here, 1 and 2, this is what is being fed into OBS that I'm using to record this video. This second rack here, this red one, ASIO driver in, is your interface or whatever you selected up here with the pick driver. These are actual physical inputs on my Apollo. So I have my microphone plugged into channel 2. This is that. And then I have some ADAT inputs as well. Those are all down here. But these are your physical inputs on your interface or within your ASIO driver. The looper in and the looper out racks I'm not going to talk about right now because they don't matter so much. But in this case, to get my microphone to pipe into OBS, I would drag from the microphone to a host in so that it's hosted within ASIO, and you have 64 channels of hosting, so there's a lot there. So there's that connection. And from here, I make another connection to the mix out, and I'm using mix 3 as my input in OBS. So I'm dragging 2 connections from the microphone, one to the left and one to the right, so that I've got a mono source. I should also mention that the ASIO driver out mix rack here are your hardware outputs for your interface. So to be able to hear something that's being piped through your speakers, like my Spotify for instance, you need to make a connection from the host to the driver, or from the speakers directly to the driver out. So in my case, my Apollo outputs 1, 2, 3, and 4 are linear here. So I've got my speakers out left and right, 1 and 2, and my headphones out 3 and 4. So when I play Spotify, I've got it routed already directly to 1 and 2. So you can see that that connection is made. And I can hear it. But if I don't have that connection made, I will not be able to hear it in my headphones. The next step is going to be getting into the networking side of things. So to preface this, you need to have admin access to your router so that you can get in and set up port forwarding, which is really the only thing we need to do to make this work. And port forwarding only needs to be done if you want to be connected to somebody over the internet. It's very easy to set up local networking. In either case, if you were going to be setting up a network being over the internet or it's your local network, the first step is to set your device's IP address to static. So the first thing you want to do is open the command prompt, type in ipconfig/all, and this will bring up your local IP address. So the things that you want to pay attention to are your IPv4 address. This is your local address on the network, your subnet mask, and your default gateway, which is your router's IP address on your network. The DNS server should also be the same as your router address, but pay attention to that as well. The next thing you want to do is go to Control Panel, Network and Internet, Network and Sharing Center, change adapter settings, and however you connect to the internet, you want to right click on that and go to Properties. Once you get to properties, go to Internet Protocol version 4, select that, and click properties. This is where you're going to set your static IP address. So select use the following IP address, put in whatever IP address you want to use. I would suggest just using whatever is listed here. IP address, your subnet mask, and your default gateway. You'll also need to put in the DNS server address, which would be your router address. These two should be the same. Click OK, and now you have a static IP address on your network. You'll need to do this for any device that you want to set up port forwarding on. So anything that you want to use ASIO Link Pro network, you'll need to set that up. The next thing you want to do is configure your router to use port forwarding on port 5050, which is the default port for ASIO Link Pro. So we do this going to your internet browser and typing in your router's IP address. You may need to sign in using a password. If you haven't gone on and changed any of these settings yourself, then check your router manufacturer's specs for the default initial login. So I'm logging into my router here. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're not behind another router. If you don't know for sure that you're not behind another router, then it's best just to check this. If you know that you're plugged into the only router on your network, then you should be good to go here. But it's best to check, I think. So the way that we do this is we check to see if our router's IP address is a local IP address or if it's a public IP address. So here we can see on the internet port settings, this is my public IP address. We can check this by Googling what is my IP address. There's my public address. If this matches here, but this domain name server, this DNS, your router's IP address does not match this, then you know you're behind a second router. So this would be the address of the second router on your server. So in my case, I am behind a second router. So I need to go to this address and log into the first router to enable port forwarding on my second router. Because by default, this first router's firewall will block the connection from ever making it to my second router, no matter how much configuration I do. So I'm going to type in that router's IP address and log into it. From here, I can see my router that I am behind. Somewhere you want to find your list of connected devices and find your router. So here's my router in the list of connected devices. I'm going to click details, and what we're looking for is firewall settings, and we want DMZ, applications, pinholes, and DMZ. In my case, this will depend on your router manufacturer, but what we're looking for is pinholes or DMZ or firewall settings. Okay, so now that we're here at the DMZ, you can see that you selected your router and you want to turn on DMZ mode, so that will allow all applications, all network traffic that flows through your router to go through the first router and to your router. So this bypasses the firewall of the first router. So do that, select save, and after that, we can go back to your main router that you're connected to. And you want to, I have to sign back in. We're going to go to advanced setup, or sorry, advanced security, advanced setup, and port forwarding. So I've already done this. What you want to do is add a custom service or a new port forwarding service, and you can name it whatever. So I'm going to name it 5050, which is the port that we're going to forward. That's the default network port for ASIO Link Pro. You can define different network ports, so you can open whatever ports you want to open here, but I'm just going to use the default. And I'm also going to open port 5051 as well. So that will give you a second network port if you want to link to two computers. You want to select TCP/UDP available if it's available, but TCP is the protocol that it uses, so select that. Set your port range, so I'm going to do 5050 to 5051. Same for the internal port. And now you want to select the IP address that that's going to forward to. So I screwed that up, 5050 to 5051. And for me, it is this desktop here. So it's whatever, you can select it or you can manually put it in, but it's whatever you set your static IP address to earlier. So I've already done this, so I'm not going to apply, but I can see here the ports that I have forwarded. So I have not actually forwarded 5051 as well, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. There we go. 5050 and 5051, and they're both forwarding to my PC. So once you've done this, you should be all set. Everything should be good to go. The next thing I'm going to do is go to my firewall. So you can search Defender Firewall, bring up Windows Defender Firewall, and we're going to go to Advanced Settings. And we're going to make two new rules, an inbound rule and an outbound rule. And this will just make sure that those ports are open on your computer's firewall as well. You may not have to do this, but it's good just to do it just in case. So first we're going to go inbound rule, new rule, select port, and it's going to be TCP and specific ports. So you can put in your port range here, 5050 to 5051 or whatever you did. Allow the connection. Domain, private, public, just leave those all selected. This is fine. You can name it what you want. So I've already done this. Again, I did 5050, 5051. So you're going to click finish. There's my rule for inbound. Do the same thing for outbound. I'm going to go port, TCP, specific ports, so 5050 to 5051. Allow the connection and name it. So I already have those done. Now we should be all set to connect with computers on your local network and computers over internet. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is send audio to another computer that's on my network. So what we're going to do is on your network in pane, set it to your local IP address. You're going to do this on both computers. So no matter what, if you're connecting to a local connection or a connection over the internet, this local IP address will be your computer's local IP address. This will not be your public IP address. So on your network output, this is where you're going to put the IP address that you're sending to. So I was sending to my friend earlier in Chicago. That's his public IP address, which he had port forwarded to his computer. But here I'm going to be sending to a computer on my local network. So here you're going to put in a local IP address. On my other computer, I'm going to put in an IP config prompt. My local IP address is 10.0.0.5. I know that already, but and we're going to enable the connection. So I'm going to be sending from my primary computer to my laptop. Now on my laptop, I'm going to do the same thing, my local IP address and my remote IP address. So this should be, if you're doing the same test I'm doing, the inverse of what you put on your other computer. Okay, here we go. Spotify is coming in on speakers 2. It's there going to this host in on 1516. And you can't hear it because your input is set to mix 3, which is here, left and right. So I can give you Spotify real quick. There you go. Now you can hear it on the input. That's not what we're going for yet. I'm going to send this out across the network. Okay, so now I have Spotify coming out, speakers 2, hosted in 1516, and then going out network 1 and 2. My other computer, it's coming in network 1 and 2, and I'm sending it to the host, 1718, and your mix is here, mix in or mix out 2. So now you're hearing Spotify in real time coming from the host PC and being sent to the second PC. So now we're going to do some Ableton streaming. So I'm going to open a recent set that I have here, and I'm going to send individual track outputs over the network to the other PC. So I've already kind of set this up here. I have 6 different tracks that are producing audio, and there are multiple ways to do this, but I'm doing it over sends. So I made 6 return tracks that are seen here, and each of my tracks are sent to those returns individually. So I have a 1-to-1 correlation. This keeps what I'm sending independent from what I'm doing on my end. And I find that this is a pretty efficient way to route this. But each of those return tracks are going to an external output. And in Ableton, I do have ASIO Link Pro set up as my device. So when you open it, you'll be greeted with a second client here, which is routing for your whatever other programs you have set up. So there's, I think, room for up to 25 clients, so that's a lot. But all of your Ableton routing will be done in here, and you still have your main host here. So these hardware outputs that I've got in Ableton will correspond to these driver out mixes here. So you'll see when I'm going to set a loop here and just play back on that loop. And you can see that the audio is being sent out of these driver out mixes. So that's all good. It's sending out. I can also hear it because I've got my master going out to my headphones and speakers, and all of the tracks are still routed to the master. It's just these return tracks that are going to the stream. So this is my client, and if we go to the host, you can see that they're also showing up here in the corresponding ASIO driver out mix rack. So I've got those 1-to-1 to my network out, and I don't need 15 and 16 right now there. So 1-to-1 to the network out. Now if I go to the other computer, I have 1-to-1 on my network in to my host in. So you can see that these tracks are coming through in real time. And I'm going to, one at a time, start to put them into the OBS mix on the laptop. And you get the idea. That is just a pretty basic primer on how all of this works. from there, the routing capabilities are really pretty endless, but this is more than enough to get you up and going and get you connected to other computers. Now, when you're in Ableton and you're using ASIO as your device, your inputs in Ableton will be these ASIO host in mix 1 through 32. So you can see here I've got one-to-one routings on, this is my interface. So my microphone is here. I've got it dragged out one-to-one to the host in mix. And then if I were to go to an audio track here in Ableton, external in, you can see there I am coming in on 2. I can move that over to 3. I'm going to come in on 2 and 3. So you see how you can take this pretty far. And you can see my looper ins I already have mapped to 17 through 32. Looper ins 1 through 16 to 17 through 32. That's how I was getting my network ins. So again, you need to handle all of your networking in your main client here. So my network ins are routed to host ins, and then from the hosting, I've got them to loopers. So it's first hitting ASIO 17 through 32, then it's immediately going to the looper out rack 1 through 16, and those looper ins in Ableton can be seen here 1 through 16, already routed to Ableton inputs 17 through 32. And you can save profiles. I highly recommend saving profiles so you can load up custom routings pretty quick and easy, and don't have to spend a lot of time doing it. Just do it once and then use it again in the future. So this is what I get by default when I load up. So I know that my network routings are already done. My Ableton routings are already done. And inputs 1 through 16 in Ableton will correspond to my hardware inputs. Inputs 17 through 32 in Ableton correspond to my network inputs. And then same with my outputs. 1 through 16 are my hardware outputs, and 17 through 32 are my network outputs.